Assalamu alaikum. If you remember from what we did in the last lecture, we are going to be discussing Francis Bacon's essays. This is a part of your ENG456 Prose-I paper, and if you remember, we're going to do some essays by Bacon, and slowly and gradually we'll go on to other essayists and discuss their works also. You see a photo that I showed you the last time also. It shows Bacon dressed as a courtier, and I told you in the last lecture that Francis Bacon is one of those very few essayists who had the honor and an enviable position as a courtier in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I of England. Now this places Francis Bacon in the list of eminent men of letters who are known as Renaissance writers. He was a courtier, as I told you before, for Queen Elizabeth I, and he's one of those very few men who survived Queen Elizabeth's reign and went on into the Jacobean age to serve under King James I of England and Scotland. Now, when we say that Francis Bacon served in the courts of Queen Elizabeth I and King James I of England, the ages that we are referring to are the Elizabethan age and the Jacobean age. Jacobean is the derivative from the adjective that is derived from the name James. And it is because he managed to survive the reign of Queen Elizabeth I that he was able to write in such a concise and pithy manner, not only in the essays that he wrote, but also in other works that he attempted. He was not only an essayist, but a jurist, a poet, a lawyer, and a theologian. He had received training in law, and this enabled him to write about virtually all aspects of life in his essays. Now, the first essay that we're going to deal with in this paper is Bacon's essay titled Of Truth. As you can see in the slide, that the essay is titled Of Truth. The majority of Bacon's essays had titles starting with of. Now, this is a very clear indication of the subject that Bacon is dealing with. Now, when we start the essay on truth, and I'm going to make sure that you have the text in front of you when I explain the different lines. One of the things that you will notice about Bacon's style, as I told you in my previous lecture, is that he is very concise. What other people would take pages to explain, Bacon says in one short sentence. So one of the most significant features of Bacon's style, and the style that you're going to notice in these essays also, is conciseness. He is very precise, to the point, and does not include any extra detail unless it is specifically required. So he starts the essay of truth with the words, "What is truth?" said jesting Pilate, and would not stay for an answer. Now, the very fact that he starts off with a question grips your attention. This is a technique that is used to take a strong hold on the reader's attention. And it is very natural when you start an essay with a question to expect an answer. But it is also a significant characteristic of Bacon's style that he does not provide the answer at once. And you notice that the words that follow are more of an explanation of the situation in which these words are uttered. So he says, Bacon writes, said jesting Pilate, and would not stay for an answer. Now he's not giving you the answer to the question that he's posed. He's not telling you what is truth. That is something that he's going to do in the rest of the essay. And with different arguments, he is going to tell us how telling the truth is better than telling a lie. Now, you might not expect a jurist or a poet or a lawyer specifically to be talking about a subject that is as commonplace and as significant in the lives of human beings as the difference between truth and lies, between what is right and true and what is wrong or false. So truth and falsehood, these are two terms that he seeks to explain in this essay. And one thing that you will notice is that the length of the essay is very significant as far as Bacon is concerned. You will not find Bacon writing pages and pages about a subject. You will see that he will write an essay of, let's say, 1 page or a page and a half. But he will leave you wondering about so many things that happen in life and so many things that might happen in your life as well as in the lives of others. Now, the reference to Pilate is a reference to the biblical story of Christ's crucifixion. The fact that he refers to jesting Pilate is a reference to the Roman Pontius Pilate, who reigned at the time that Christ was crucified. Now, those of you who are familiar with the story of Christ also know that Christ was crucified, that is, he was hanged on the cross, his body was impaled on the cross, along with those of thieves, and by doing that, the impression that was given was that he had no more importance than a common thief. So Christ's claim that he was the truth is something that Pilate is contesting here. Now, this slide shows you the claim of Jesus Christ when he said that he was witness to the truth. And Christ saying, I am witness to the truth, led Pontius Pilate to come up with the question, what is truth? And this was said in jest. This was said as a joke. What Christ said was said in all seriousness. Christ had a mission to accomplish. And the mission that Christ had taken on was the salvation of mankind. Now, the salvation of mankind is not a project that can at any time be underestimated. And yet, Christ's claim that he was witness to the truth gets this response from Pilate. And it is as if he's making a joke of the whole thing. And then, having asked that question, having thrown that question up in the air, he leaves. in the lines that follow, Bacon states, "Certainly there be that delight in giddiness, and count it a bondage to fix a belief, affecting free will in thinking as well as in acting." Now, some of you might find Bacon's language a little difficult to understand, but you need to keep in mind the fact that Bacon was writing in the Renaissance age. So he was writing, let's say, 600 years before our time. And the English language in those days had not undergone as much development and as much change as contemporary English has. So Bacon's words need to be paid proper attention to. So when he says, "Certainly there be that delight in giddiness," that refers to those people who delight in making fun. And he's pointing out specifically at Pontius Pilate. You have here the emperor faced with a man who claims to be the truth, a man who claims to represent truth. And you see how the emperor treats him. He makes a joke out of the whole thing. Instead of taking Christ's words seriously, he just, throws up a question in the air and says, "What is truth?" And then he doesn't even wait for the answer. So when Bacon refers to this question that Pontius Pilate threw up in the air, what he's talking about and what he's trying to explain is that there are people who think that cracking jokes and making fun of other human beings is their sole purpose in life. And these are people who will take the most serious business in life very lightly. One example that Bacon gives is that of Pontius Pilate. You have an emperor here who is faced with a personality as Jesus Christ. And this is all he can respond with. What is truth? And then he leaves the court. So in doing this, Bacon gives us food for thought. Food for thought, because there are things in life which need to be taken very, very seriously and which cannot be shrugged off as a joke. So Bacon says there are those people in life who spend their whole life making jokes, mostly at the expense of others. Now this statement becomes very relevant when you keep in mind the fact that Christ was crucified because Christ, according to the teachings of the Christian Church, opted to take on himself the sorrows of mankind, the sins of mankind, and thereby to attain salvation. Now this entailed a very big sacrifice, and the sacrifice was that of Christ's life. He had to sacrifice his life in order to save mankind. Now you're not talking about one person or two persons or 100 persons here. What you're talking about is all mankind. So people like Pontius Pilate, who enjoy making fun of others, who ridicule others, are not to be emulated. They are not to be copied. And that is what Bacon is trying to tell us when he says, "Certainly there be that delight in giddiness, and count it a bondage to fix a belief." Christ had belief. Christ had faith. Christ had faith in mankind. Christ was the savior of mankind. And yet you see that when he states, when he claims that he is witness to the truth, the response that he gets from the emperor is, "What is truth?" and he leaves. He leaves the room, not allowing further explanation to Jesus Christ. So there are those people in life, and we encounter these people every day of our lives, who enjoy making fun of other people, who, when they are faced with the most serious of purposes, will shrug it off with a laugh and say, it makes no difference. But these are people whose speech and acts are emulated by other people. When you have a Roman emperor of the status of Pontius Pilate making such a comment, you can take it for granted that the courtiers will respond in the same way and will not give due importance to someone who has a serious purpose, whose presence in the court is not a small matter. It is of grave significance. There is a seriousness of purpose that is involved here. Now this question, what is truth, said jesting Pilate, has been taken from the Gospel of John, and those of you who are familiar with the division of the Bible will know that the Holy Bible comprises of the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Psalms of David. Now, one of the sections of the Bible, of the New Testament that is titled the Gospel of John. And in the Gospel of John, you find this line, what is truth? And this is the English translation of the Latin verse. Now, if you remember from what I told you in the first lecture, Francis Bacon got his education in the medieval curriculum. Now, when we refer to the medieval curriculum, we know for sure that Bacon was educated in the Latin language. And as I referred in my previous lecture, there are countless places in which Francis Bacon uses Latin phrases, principally when he finds no exact equivalents in the English language. That is not to say that there are no equivalents. English, as you and I know, and as the world knows, is one of the richest languages of the world. But the period at which Bacon was writing, English was not as enriched as it is now. So, time and again, Bacon uses Latin terms, Latin phrases, just as he has borrowed this phrase from the Bible. Different stories relate Pilate's involvement in Christ's crucifixion, and if you can get hold of one of the books that tells stories from the Bible, you'll be able to read in detail about the story of Pontius Pilate and Jesus Christ in the court of Pontius Pilate. And though the sects of philosophers of that kind be gone, yet there remain certain discoursing wits which are of the same veins, though there be not so much blood in them as was in those of the ancients. Now, one of the characteristics that you find Bacon specializes in is a pun upon the word. And I hope all of you are familiar with the term a pun upon the word. For those of you who are not, let me explain at this point what exactly a pun entails. A pun, and it's spelled P-U-N, a pun upon the word is when you use a word spelled the same way in a totally different context from the one in which it frequently occurs. Now let me give you an example from this text. On the slide you see Bacon saying the same veins. Now a vein, as you normally take it to be, is a part of the circulatory system of the body. It could be the human body, it could also be another creature, not necessarily human. Now, what you know about the circulatory system is that the circulatory system comprises of arteries, veins, and capillaries. The smallest arteries or veins are called capillaries, and they are so tiny that some of them cannot be seen with the human eye. And yet, if a capillary or an artery is cut accidentally or deliberately, what you get is a spurt of blood. Now, when Bacon uses this word vein and he talks about reading and writing, he's talking about discourse, he talks about discourse wits, he's not referring to the vein in the same vein. Let me make that clear. When we are talking in the same vein, we are on the same level. We're talking about the same subject, and you and I know what the context is. You and I are familiar with how exactly we're going to tackle this subject. So when Bacon talks about sections of society divided into philosophers, divided into wits, into poets, he also talks about those philosophers, and they're not a great number left, but those few philosophers who, like Pontius Pilate, enjoy making fun of other people. And those philosophers are the people that Bacon is referring to here. And when he says that there be not so much blood in them, he's again referring to the veins that are a part of the circulatory system. So there are a few people still left who claim to be philosophers and yet who enjoy making fun of what people are saying. So he calls, now Bacon is very ironic, and he calls these philosophers certain discoursing wits, people who are very fond of talking, and not only fond of talking, but also of publicizing what it is that they're talking. So in a very ironic manner, Bacon refers to them as philosophers and as discoursing wits. But he also gives a little hope when he says that the philosophers of today are not as strong in wit, in intellect, in speech, as the philosophers of ancient times. So when he talks about Pontius Pilate, obviously he's talking about a period that is more than 2,000 years ago. Remember, Christ is living. It's not Anno Domini or AD as we refer to the Gregorian calendar. It is BC that he's talking about, before Christ was crucified. So this is this phrase, this question that Pontius Pilate throws in the air, what is truth, is a phrase that is uttered before Christ's crucifixion. So definitely more than 2,000 years ago. We are in the 21st century, and you need to remember that the time at which Pontius Pilate speaks, the time at which Jesus Christ says that he is witness to the truth, is a time that is BC, not Anno Domini. So these philosophers, they still exist, but they are not as strong as those philosophers who lived at the time of Christ in antiquity. So when he talks about there being not so much blood, he's talking about there being not so much force in the speech and actions of these philosophers. So if you compare, for example, a philosopher of the Renaissance period with a philosopher of Christ's time, there is a definite minimizing of the strength in speech and actions. And obviously a Roman emperor would have more power in speech and actions than an ordinary human being or even a courtier during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I or the reign of King James I. So when we talk about the reigns of King James I and that of Queen Elizabeth I, we need to keep in mind this one courtier, jurist, lawyer, poet, theologian who is writing essays which have been held up as examples of the most concise writing in the English language. So getting back to the essay, Bacon says, it is not only the difficulty and labor which men take in finding out of truth, nor again that when it is found, it imposeth upon men's thoughts that doth bring lies in favor, but a natural though corrupt love of the lie itself. So it's not out of necessity that these people tell lies. When you talk about lies and you talk about truth, you need to establish the need to tell the truth. You need to establish the need to lie. But, as Bacon points out, there are people who tell lies not because there's a need, not because it's a matter of life and death, not because it's a matter of honor and shame, but because there is some weird compulsion. It's not because a lie will serve them better. Sometimes it's because the lie sounds better. Now you might say that that is a weird reason, but if you read carefully the words that Bacon has penned, he says it is not only the difficulty and labor which men take in finding out of truth. So it's not that truth is difficult. It's not that truth will make or create problems in life for you. It's not that at all. Nor again that when it is found, it imposeth upon men's thoughts that doth bring lies in favor. So it's not even that truth, when it is ultimately found, is more difficult to hear or to implement. It's not that at all. So it's not the difficulties that make men tell lies. It has nothing to do with truth becoming difficult to find out. It has nothing to do with its being difficult to implement the truth. The fact of the matter is that there is a fondness for the lie itself. It's not that the lie serves a purpose. It's not that telling a lie is going to make you more money. It's just what you call compulsive lying. And you know what compulsive lying is? Telling lies when there's no need to. Telling a lie when you can tell the truth also. Telling a lie when telling a truth is not difficult. Telling a truth will not create hurdles for you in your life. It's just the love of the lie itself. It's just because there's something very attractive in telling a lie. Now you might think that that is crazy, but there are people, and there are people around you also, who lie even when there is no need to. And such people are the focus of Francis Bacon's attention when he talks about truth not being difficult, not being difficult to impose or implement, but because the lie is more attractive. Telling a lie creates a kind of excitement in your life. It lends color to your life. And then what Bacon does is he shifts his focus a little. And it's not that he's going off at a tangent or he's discussing something that that's not concerned with the truth. It's very much a part of truth. But he goes off and digresses for a short time, and he refers to one of the fathers who very strictly, in all seriousness, called poesy, that is, the modern day equivalent would be poetry. So poesy was referred to as venum demonum. Now, because the word has a Latin sound to it, does not mean that it's difficult to understand. When Latin is written down, it's not all that difficult to translate. And even without seeing the closest meaning that's been given in parentheses, you know that it has something to do with being a demon, with being poison. So when Bacon talks about one of the great theorists, one of the great philosophers, talking about poetry as something that is poisonous or something that is devilish in origin, he is doing so because, as he says, it filleth the imagination, and yet it is but with the shadow of a lie. So there is a reason for calling poesy the devil's work. So there is truth in calling this the devil's work, because, as Bacon goes on to explain, poetry fills the imagination. Now, you have studied in your poetry one, you've done the classicists, you've done Chaucer, you've done Spenser, you've done Milton, Donne and Pope, and you will have noticed that in order to create poetry, you need to use your imagination. You cannot create poetry if your imagination does not work. Now, you will be doing poetry too also. You are probably doing the Romantics, the Victorians, and you know, and you're familiar with the Romantic notion of poetry, that it is overflowing of very strong emotions. So when Bacon refers to poesy as having been called the devil's work, or something that poisons the mind, it's because it fills the imagination. And yet, what is the world of imagination? The world of imagination is what we make of things, not what is actually there. It's not a world of reality. It's the world of imagination. And the world of imagination is, in Bacon's words, the shadow of a lie. Not the lie itself, mind you. The lie itself is more powerful, stronger, more harmful. Poetry or imagination is the shadow of a lie, not the thing itself. So what he's, in other words, what he's trying to say here is that one of the great philosophers, in all seriousness, condemned poetry The sole reason being that poetry depends on imagination, and imagination is the shadow of a lie. Imagination is the shadow of a falsehood. It is not the truth at all. Now that gives you something to think about. So those of you who are into creating poetry, this is not to criticize or condemn your work, but this is one aspect of poetry that Bacon is highlighting in order to explain what exactly entails the truth and why is it that falsehood is condemned. Now, when Bacon gets into explanations, he does not leave anything to the reader to analyze and try to find out for himself. He gives you the argument, he gives you the pros and cons, he gives you all aspects of the arguments. And if you remember from what we were discussing in the previous lecture, one of the types of essays is the argumentative. And Bacon employs in this essay both the expository, in which he explains what truth is, and the argumentative. So what he's doing is he's explaining everything, he's exposing what is truth, and then he's also giving arguments to support his stance, to support his point of view. So he says, it is not the lie that passeth through the mind, but the lie that sinketh in and settleth in it that doth the hurt, such as we spake of before. So the spake of before refers to the incident of Christ in the court of Pontius Pilate. Christ trying to present his case, Christ trying to make the emperor realize the seriousness of the purpose, the seriousness of the goal of being savior of mankind. So what Bacon says is that it is not the lie that passeth through the mind. If you take these two ears to be the entrance and exit, and what stops everything that goes in from coming out of the other side is that we have a brain inside. And that brain filters everything that comes in both ears. So when you talk about lies, you're not talking about the kind of lie that you hear in one ear and exit in the other ear. It's not the kind of lie that passes through your mind. It's the kind of lie that settles, that sinks into your mind, that stays in your long-term memory. The kind of lie that was spoken by Pontius Pilate. The kind of falsehood that Pilate spoke when faced with the truth of Jesus Christ. Christ represented truth. Pilate, as the Roman emperor, as the dictator, as the monarch, as the oppressor, represented falsehood. He represented lies. And lies grow fast. You know that if you tell the truth, you make one statement. But if you tell a lie, you have to tell 10 other lies to cover that original lie. So it's the lie that sinketh in, the lie that settleth in the mind, that harms the most. So it's not the kind of falsehood that is insignificant that matters. What matters is the lie that is believed. When Bacon talks about the lie that sinketh in and settleth in, he's talking about the kind of lie that is believed. So whether it is an excuse that you give for coming home late, or an excuse that you give to stay back in a college, in the library, in the university to complete your assignments, a lie is a lie. Whether it is white or black is immaterial. It is a lie. It is a falsehood. And Bacon's aim is to have these ideas sinking into the minds of his readers, and thereby establishing the importance of truth. So what he's doing is he's making out a case for truth, and he's trying to show that lies never pay. If you just go back to the example of Pontius Pilate and Christ, people remember the name of Pontius Pilate not with admiration, not because they appreciate what he said or did, but because he is the arch villain in the story that has Jesus Christ as the hero. So the lie that hurts the most is not the lie that passes through the mind, is the lie that sinketh and settleth. And you notice here that the kind of language that Bacon is using is Elizabethan. So slightly Old English, but not difficult to understand, where you see that the eth at the end, that is ETH, has been replaced in contemporary English by the S, the simple letter S. So settleth, sinketh, passeth is settles, sinks, passes. Not very difficult words at all, are they? It just needs a little concentration, a little focus on what you're studying, and you can understand Bacon's language very easily. And of course you people have done Chaucer. So when you've done Chaucer, Bacon's language is not all that difficult, is it? Let's move on. So Bacon goes on to say, howsoever these things are thus in men's depraved judgments and affections, yet truth, which only doth judge itself, teacheth that, and you notice the words are in bold here, the inquiry of truth, the knowledge of truth, and the belief of truth, which is the sovereign good of human nature. So three things you need to remember: inquiry of truth, the knowledge of truth, and the belief of truth. If you have these three and you hold on to the inquiry of truth, the knowledge of truth, and the belief of truth, you are saved. You have nothing to fear. You have nothing to worry about. So howsoever these things are in men's depraved judgments and affections, yet, no matter how much people may try to convince you that you should tell a lie because it's easy, you should tell a lie because you won't have any problems, you need to fight against the temptation of lying. You need to tell the truth. You need to tell the truth in spite of all men's attempts to sidetrack you, to take you away from the path of truth, because it is truth only which judges itself. It is only truth that can sit in judgment on itself. Falsehood cannot. Falsehood cannot bear judgments. Falsehood cannot tolerate being contested. Truth can. Truth only will save you. The inquiry of truth, the knowledge of truth, and the belief of truth. These three things will save you. No matter what other human beings may say, no matter how they may try to convince you, you need to remember only one thing, and that is that truth only can sit in judgment on itself. Lies cannot, no matter how beautiful those lies may seem, no matter how attractive they may sound. You must only go for the truth. And when he explains the inquiry of truth and the knowledge of truth and the belief of truth, he uses examples. And you see that the inquiry of truth he compares to lovemaking, an act which is self-rewarding. You don't need to wait for a reward. It carries its reward within it. The knowledge of truth, that is the presence of truth, and the belief of truth, which is the enjoying of it. When you believe in truth, then you appreciate truth. When you believe in truth, then you admire people who tell the truth. Because you are truthful, you want others to be truthful. Then you cannot tolerate lies. Then you cannot endure lies. Because you believe in the truth, you appreciate truth, you admire truth in others. You will not tolerate lies. And then, of course, Bacon goes on to the Greek philosophers. You remember he's had a medieval education, so he has a very strong background of Greek philosophy and of Latin philosophy. So one of the later school of the Grecians examineth the matter and is at a stand to think what should be in it that men should love lies, where neither they make for pleasure as with poets, nor for advantage as with the merchant, but for the lie's sake. So one of the later schools of Greek thought, Bacon does not give names, but he says that this matter of the truth is examined by the Greeks. And one of the philosophers says that I have tried to examine why men tell lies, and I am unable to think of a valid reason for it. It's not that telling a lie gives you pleasure, and there he refers to poesy as being the devil's work because it has the shadow of a lie. So it's not that writing poetry gives pleasure. They're not poets, so they're not concerned with the pleasure that a poet gets out of creating a poetic work, a verse, a stanza, maybe a whole poem. So it's not that they are poets. It's not even that they're businessmen. He talks about merchants. Now merchants, businessmen, they will say anything to make money. They will tell the most stupendous lies if it's going to get them money. So he presents these two examples. He presents the example of the poet, he presents the example of the merchant or the businessman. And he says the people who are telling lies are neither poets nor merchants. Poets will benefit because they use an imaginary world, they go into the world of imagination, they have flights of imagination, and then they create poetry. So they're getting something out of it. The merchant is getting something out of it because if he tells a lie, he makes more money than he would if he told the truth. So if something is costing 1,000 rupees, and the merchant says, for example, that this fabric or this vase or this piece of furniture has been brought all the way from across the world, it's a lie. It's a barefaced lie. But if the customer, if the client believes him, he stands to make more money. So something that he would sell for 1,000 rupees, he can sell for 5,000 if he says it was made in India or made in England or made in the USA. So instead of 1,000, he makes 5,000. But the point is, Bacon says, I am talking about people who will not benefit from telling a lie. So why do they then tell lies? And the reason is that they just like lying. It's not that telling a lie will benefit them. They're not getting anything out of it. But telling a lie is a big temptation. It's a temptation that they cannot resist. And then he gives you a strange reason. And he says, this same truth is a naked and open daylight. And mind you, the words that he's using, the metaphors that he uses are beautiful. So you need to focus on Bacon's language when you're studying Bacon's essays. So this same truth is a naked and open daylight that doth not show the masks and mummeries and triumphs of the world, half so stately and daintily as candlelights. So he answers his own question of why do people tell lies? And the conclusion that he reaches is that telling a lie is more attractive. Telling the truth is not all that attractive. So when he says that telling the truth is a naked and open daylight, you know how strong the sun is? It exposes everything. It makes you see an object from all aspects. You can't hide in broad daylight, but you can hide at night. So candlelight is more attractive. You know, you go out in the sunlight, you hold up a mirror to your face, and you can see all the blemishes. Truth is like that. Truth is broad daylight. Truth is the light of the sun. Falsehood is candlelight. Anyone, anything, any place can appear attractive in candlelight. Darkness hides shortcomings. Darkness hides weak points, negative sides. The sun reveals everything. Truth reveals everything. Candlelight only shows the most attractive portions. Candlelight illuminates the most prominent aspects. It's a beautiful metaphor. The sunlight is equivalent to the truth. Candlelight is equivalent to falsehood, because candlelight deceives. Candlelight lies. Candlelight is deception. Daylight is clarity. Daylight is reality. Daylight is the truth. Candlelight is falsehood. Candlelight hides everything. that you do not want to show. Candlelight will only emphasize the aspects that you want emphasized, because you put a candle close to an object that you want to show, and you take it away from the object that you don't want to show. Anything that you don't want to show, you take the candle away from it. And because it is in darkness, it is hidden. If you have something beautiful to show in your house, you put a special light over it. You don't expose the whole house to the daylight, because then we can see everything. Then we can see the shortcomings. Then we can see where the builders have messed up. But if there is low lighting, then all these faults, all these shortcomings are hidden. And then he brings in another comparison, and he says, truth is like a pearl. It's the price of a pearl. Now, a pearl is something that gives the same light or luminance in the daytime that it would give at night. A pearl is a pearl by day or by night. There's no way that you can differentiate it. But a diamond shines brightly if there is direct light on it. So remember that metaphor of candlelight and daylight? A diamond or a carbuncle needs something that throws a direct light on it. It's kind of like you have spotlights. The pearl does not need spotlights. The pearl is as beautiful in candlelight as it is in daylight. But a diamond cannot be seen in the daylight, because a diamond emits rays of light. And there can be no stronger light than the light of the sun. So when you have a diamond in broad daylight, you know that it's a diamond, but that's about it. You cannot differentiate the diamond from a piece of glass. You cannot differentiate between the crystal and the diamond. But the pearl stays the same. So another comparison that Bacon brings in is that of the diamond being a falsehood, a lie, and a pearl being the truth. Truth is the same in the daytime as it is in the nighttime. Falsehood is not. A diamond will not shine when it is placed in sunlight, because then it has to compete with the light of the sun. Since the sun emits light, the diamond emits light, the two in comparison is not a comparison at all. The diamond, the light that the diamond emits, pales before the light that the sun emits. So the pearl stays the same. Truth stays the same. Falsehood needs candlelight. Falsehood needs to disguise itself. Falsehood needs to get help in order to make it attractive and enticing. And then he gives you another situation. And this is again a speciality of Francis Bacon. He says, a mixture of a lie doth ever add pleasure. Doth any man doubt that if they were taken out of men's minds vain opinions, flattering hopes, false valuations, imaginations as one would, and the like, but it would leave the minds of a number of men poor shrunken things, full of melancholy and indisposition, and unpleasing to themselves? Not a strange idea at all. A mixture of the lie with the truth makes the truth more palatable, makes the lie more attractive. You find people referring to white lies, and they'll say, no, I told this lie because, and that because or that reason is supposed to justify the telling of the lie. But Bacon does not advocate that. Bacon does not advise you to tell lies, no matter how attractive that lie may appear. And when he's giving this example of what goes on in men's minds, you see the kind of ideas that he brings in. He brings in vain opinions, flattering hopes, false valuations, imaginations. You take these things out of men's minds, and what do you leave behind? You leave behind a mind that shrinks. It shrinks because vain hopes give you a very disguised idea of your capabilities. People will flatter you. People will praise you to your face. And these praises fill men's minds. And when these praises fill men's minds, they start believing in these lies. So if one of you, for example, says, I'm the world's best teacher, it's flattery, because you do not know what the rest of the world comprises of. You have not been taught by other teachers. So when you say, I'm the world's best teacher, you're flattering me. And my mind is filled with vain hope. And when my mind is filled with vain hope, I am believing in lies. I am encouraging the telling of lies. According to Bacon's philosophy, the truth must always be told. There can be no second opinions on this. The truth is important. The truth is the most important thing. Lies, falsehood appear very attractive. The devil appears very attractive. Evil appears very attractive. Vice is always attractive. It's a big temptation. But then, vice cannot face sitting in judgment on itself. Falsehood, lies cannot sit in judgment on itself. The truth only can sit in judgment on itself. Now, just to sort of go over what we've done today, we started off with Bacon's essay on of truth, and I told you that Bacon's essays have these titles in which of is a very integral part of the title, and it gives you an indication of what he's going to be discussing in that essay. And you find Bacon presenting various points of view, and he makes out a case for truth versus falsehood, and gives you many different examples, gives you incidents from history, gives you incidents from the Bible, in order to establish why truth must be told and lies or falsehood condemned at all levels. According to Bacon's point of view, there can be no justification for not telling the truth, for not believing in the truth, for not supporting the truth. There can be no possible justification for that. Lies appear very attractive. There's a big temptation to tell a lie, but that temptation must be resisted. You cannot give in to that temptation, because you will end up by telling one lie after another, and there is no end to it. Thank you very much for being patient. That will be all for today.